Today, creating tomorrow. A better tomorrow.
Good afternoon. Now in English, and I guess the joke about we're lucky in America that you did give up Manhattan. Thank you for inviting me. Thanks, Arcadis. Thank you for all you Dutch people. I think that I'm fortunate that I come from a city that was attractive enough to be of some concern to the world. If most cities had suffered what New Orleans suffered, less desirable places, they would have had a hard time getting as far as we've gotten. What I'm really here to show you is sort of a preview of what we have as a water strategy to recreate the city. It's ambitious, maybe audacious, but in our time, anything less than something bold is going to fail. I mean, the problems we face going into the future are not small. So then where are we in New Orleans? Well, we have water, but only limited water, and we need to reconstruct it. So what we're proposing is that we build a water city, which would not be something that America really consciously has. Our inspiration is this city. Not just the water plan that Rotterdam did, not just the water plan that you're now in version 2 of, but also the Rosa plan that was done in the 1850s, where an architect proposed a structure for a city that's carried forward now 150 years to give a new identity to the city. Louisiana is an important place founded on water. You know, Thomas Jefferson bought the place for the Port of New Orleans. He bought Louisiana for the Port of New Orleans. So we have that basis, and we have this structure, this flood protection system that Arcadis had something to do with here. And you see at Isaac, it worked. It kept the water out. But within the city, we have another problem because of the runoff. This is the picture of any urbanized area where it's mostly urban runoff now. It's not getting into the ground anymore. And so what that's done is give us these huge surges. So if you look at this unattractive canal in New Orleans, you see, well, this is the dry condition, but who would want to live next to that? So it's undesirable. But then the surge that same canal gets makes it very difficult to manage. So between low and high at the brim, you see the problem. And then we have this perverse exclusion of water from the landscape. So the premise here is that we need change. The state of Louisiana has a coastal master plan, and it proposes lines of defense. When it gets inside the dike, it gets to the part that America's pretty good at, which is evacuation. You see, you elevate the house and you evacuate. But we're trying to say, no, you manage water internally. And so as we propose this, then these series of steps that we think we can take, first being inspiration, then acting, and then by 2040, we believe we can get a lot of the objectives we set out accomplished. We have a great team. You see in the orange there, the leading member of that team is Arcadis. We're working with a lot of really smart Dutch people, and we've had a great collaboration. So where are we in Louisiana? We're really, like you, not living on solid ground. This thick water concept that you understand well when you dig a subway in Rotterdam, we don't really understand, or people don't quite appreciate in Louisiana. But if you only look at the pattern of the river, this drawing has become these set of drawings, these maps have become very famous. The river has this course. And so its depositions, when you look at the soils of New Orleans, are still there in the same sort of mechanisms. The same histories are in the ground. And then you look back into the landscape, you see the map of Louisiana there perhaps. But you can see that maybe the Louisiana painter in the 19th century was inspired by the Dutch landscape painter. He wasn't Van Riestale, but he was a good painter. And then you start to see where the city actually was placed in the beginning. It was on high ground, on the back slope. And if you look across to the horizon, you see the lake, and then you see that watery area that was out there. Well, that was the foundation of the city, but then the technology allowed the people of the city to come and build in the areas that were wet. So this great pump, that A. Baldwin wood pump that helped drain the Zuider Zee, and this technology and the arrogance of man with a limited amount of feedback about what was going to happen. Now we have a flood defense system, and you see this great wall of Louisiana that Arcadis had a lot to do with, thankfully, that really has created what is now fundamentally an island city. with impounded wetlands, which is almost unheard of in the world that you would have wetlands inside a flood defense system. So how do we operate this? Ebbs and flows, I heard already. So then, if we try to operate within that and we try to stay dry, how do we keep from losing ground? Because the problem in Louisiana is a lot less benign than the problem in the Netherlands. If you look at the key statistics there, flood, storm surge, and you look at rainfall per hour, we have double the storm surge and we have triple the rainfall per hour. A tough design metric. And you look at then, even with all the investments in drainage that we have, New Orleans drainage system can pump the capacity of the Ohio River. This is not a limited drainage system, but still we get this limited flooding in certain areas. We've created in this work what's basically our water assignment, the drainage amount, the amount that the system can't drain that we need to store. And we've assigned that over the areas, huge amounts of water that need to be stored. If we don't begin to store water and we continue pump, then we continue to sink. And you see the red line there on the section of the city that shows you what man has done to the landscape and sunk it about 8 feet below sea level, where it was once at sea level. 1927, they knew what was happening, but they continue because we haven't identified clearly until now, hopefully, the alternative to this pump-only regime. You see how soft the land is. You see it falling away from us even as we dry it more. And we can continue this because if you look at the subsidence potential, if you look at the organic soils that are there, we can keep this up. We can continue to ruin our own landscape. That would not be my recommendation, though. So if you look now at maybe some of you can tell where the city of New Orleans is. It's above the bend of the river with the lake where there's no blue in there because we created a drainage system that was inappropriate to the place. So what we have is now a lot of underappreciated assets. And as you begin again, I'm an architect, right? You look at the problem and you look at the opportunity that's there with that problem. And we have a lot of miles of waterfront property that we can now create with the closure structures at the lake that were put there after Katrina. So citizens will find their way. You know, this is basically your citizen-led project that we're doing in Louisiana. This is not coming out of government. Government now supports, but it's the freedom of democracy and also the absence of some leadership and the absolute need that we have. So you see people beginning to use these assets. So then going forward, how do we adapt the systems that we have to become something more? We have this daily flow problem because we have to design the system for drought as well as rainfall. So we have to flush the system, as Rosa thought he was going to cleanse Rotterdam. But we also have to manage a stormwater flow system. It's both dry and wet. We can actually set this up. New Orleans can be a wonderful water game. At the core of it is this water system that we have been working with Dutch people to create. Even with more drainage improvements, the existing flooding you see there, even with more drainage improvements and some best management practices, we have this residual flooding. Much less. So then we look at the typologies that can help with that. And it begins in the backyard. It begins in your property, my property. It then goes into the street because we can't build streets like they build upriver. We have to build streets that are specific to our place. And then you look at highways because we don't couple in America water management and transportation. That may sound dumb to you, but in South Louisiana, it's really almost critical. And then you look at places you can create waterways. So what we've done is create typologies here that can be added. We have parks that drain into the system instead of holding water from the city. We have we're a sort of alternative universe in some ways in New Orleans. But what we do have in the future as a possibility is to create, as Arnold said, a true ecological city. Because we have within the city these wetlands, these vibrant areas. It's not a highly urbanized area relatively, and we have the chance to bring nature into the city. So saying all that, then what are the solutions? Those are solutions, but those are typologies. And then we've looked also at some design-specific places that we can seed as pilot projects, as Pete was saying. So, and we've put those around. As you can see, we're trying to graft the city back together. We've distributed them throughout this area of our study. Well, when you've done all that, you've still got to have some identity. You can't just have a city of random things. You eventually got to get a new identity out of this. So waterfronts are a big piece of it. The waterfronts in New Orleans are only being reclaimed now. We have an inner harbor, really industrial canal that we can envision as a new place, as a place to live and a place to work that's protected waterways. We also have underdeveloped land and regional connections that we can use throughout the city. This drawing is being done with Pombout, the thinking through these old corridors that are not used. And then some least effort ways of revising transportation in conjunction with water to revitalize the city. I think the Dutch are good at means of least effort. We could talk about windmills or we could talk about vacations, but I'll leave it there. We also have these blockages in our system. This is an arterial system, and we have these blockages. And so if we can allot space, which after a disaster there is now in many places, you can take the intense flood and use it otherwise as agriculture. So then you have these opportunities. Some of the canals are just beautification problems. I mean, the Wester Single remains an inspiration in all its different ways, right? So here's an example of an ugly canal made into something much more desirable. Everybody likes it. And now we begin to reinvest in this method. Not all are urbanized. Many things are more native in a way, and that would be another example of a native canal. Here's an example. These are all drawings, you see, but these are all projects that have constituencies developing around them. So this is a commercial, suburban commercial sort of situation. Here's an experiment we have in Louisiana about trying to pave the whole earth. And so our version of it in this industrial commercial area is trying to strip the pavement back out of it. And we're working with the leadership group there. And then you have these conditions where, well, we have an area really prone to subsidence. And so we create this program for floating streets, which may be a strange concept. I hope it is. And then when it's wet, you've got this other environment there. But basically, it's a passive approach to building streets. Then you look at neutral grounds. We have these things between streets we call neutral grounds, and we actually make them convex instead of concave. They're perversely backward again. So just regrading certain areas. An explicit one, there are 2 or 3 more of these projects. Explicitly, a water machine is being made, created for this site between 2 Catholic orders that'll be an environmental education center between the Jesuits and an order of nuns, which I think is an interesting, let's say, marriage. Then we have the opportunity for outfall canals. Remember the 15 or 16 miles of properties Pete pointed out right after the storm. Well, you have these closure structures. You can do something with all those waterways now. Well, yes, you can do something with all those waterways. This takes effort and time. We are only building the contingency and doing the math now that allows us to show when the walls can come down. But when that happens, then you get a sustainable city, because it's going to take a lot more people, as I'll show you in just a second. Okay, the last of these projects is the Lafitte Blue Way, conceived as a greenway, about 3 miles long, an urban path that was the first canal in the city. And here you see it in a dry condition, very wet, and here you see it in a flood condition. So that is then a key to the circulation system and also a revitalizing place that cuts through the city. That has federal support also at this point. We've made some progress here, but we have a long way to go. So moving forward, we have a long strategy. This is just a piece of. It's based on the societal needs. These are necessities. These are not niceties, though we want to convert them to that. These are all things that we need in Louisiana, and it's a shared value proposition. So this version of capitalism, I believe, can sustain itself. If it does not sustain itself, then how many people can afford that flood protection system? How many people does it take? What are their taxes? Only about 800,000 people live inside that flood defense system right now. It's going to be very expensive unless more people are attracted. Attracting people creates more people and more people. And fortunately, New Orleans has gotten a lot of young people in it in the times past, in the years since Katrina. This is, again, not solely anthropocentric. This is about diversity of species. This is an opportunity that New Orleans and Louisiana has that Rotterdam needs to encourage, all cities need to encourage. What are the different species that live here? What manages the mosquito? And then how do we take care of the earth? We were granted dominion, and I would say to you, we're not doing a very good job. So where is the future of this planet? And as we look at that, it's going to be some of it's just teaching kids, teaching them to swim. teaching them to play with water, teaching them to work with water, junior engineers, maybe some architects too. But we can't forget, in conclusion, that it's upstream also, and that old people know things that young people need to learn. We're all connected in this. And if we try to leave our mark too strongly on this earth, I think the earth takes back. So it's really the design object earth that interests us as we work in New Orleans. Thank you.
Thank you, David. This last picture make me think of a visit I once brought to China. You told me before we started you had been in China too, and there's a Chinese saying that you have to cross the river very slowly while touching for stones when you're doing it. One question, just one question. What was that about the Jesuits and the nuns?
Well, it was a figure. There's an order of nuns in New Orleans that have been there since 1860 about. They were flooded in the storm, this 25-acre site. After the flood, they tried to...
So God didn't exist?
Well, that's another story. Okay. Well, and let's go further with that story, because they tried to resettle the place. And as they resettled the place for a little while, they were struck by lightning. And so then they said, I don't think maybe we should build here.
No.
Well, they heard about our program, sort of said, we believe in you, which is a burden. And then we're trying to get the Jesuits, Loyola University, involved now to put athletic fields and environmental education there. They're in the legal frame of that, and most of you Dutch professionals dread the American legal system. So that's where they are right now, trying to make that water machine in this 25, which can take water from the area, bring it there, teach people about it, and it offsets the flood. So we're trying to do more than just flood prevention here.
Beautiful story. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
David Wagonner.
Today, creating tomorrow. A better